1. For context, I live in Kentucky. I recently began the process of starting a podcast dedicated to all things paranormal and strange in the high strangeness sense. While out with my dad discussing my first episode, which I'm preparing to master, he brought up a story from our family's past that I've never heard. But I now sit up at 2 a.m. scouring the internet in search of more information about it. Also, it's 2 a.m. So forgive any part of this that doesn't make sense from a writing standpoint. The story. My paternal grandfather was the 7th son of a 7th son. His mother was herself a proclaimed witch. I'm not sure if that factors in. It's also 2 a.m. for my dad as well. But ultimately, the part of the story my dad told me that has me here is this. Just before my paternal grandmother met my paternal grandfather, she was dating a man, Wallace. Wallace was professed and apparently witnessed turning into a bat, along with several other abilities, as a result of a run-in he had earlier in life with someone called Apollos. When he was a young boy, he was playing in the woods near the border of Indiana when this creature crossed his path. The actual interaction is unknown to me, but the side I was told was of Wallace's mom. She was driving home when she witnessed Apollos cross the road in front of her, but she wasn't alarmed. In fact, it didn't even register until she got home to find her son in the state he was in. I'm also intrigued by something my dad told me here. Apparently, this event was prophesied by the aforementioned witch, including the part about her not being afraid. But as the story continued, I was told a number of odd occurrences involving Wallace and the abilities he possessed, including an attempt to join the military, only to have them discover he had double organs. I was originally thinking vampire, obviously because of the biting neck and bat habits, but apparently he was never perceived as undead. He didn't feed for sustenance, and he didn't have anything beyond the obvious connection to vampiric lore. In fact, the way it was presented to me was such that this Apollos creature was more cryptid than undead. But that is a story told to me by my dad more than 30 years after it was told to him by people who lived it over a decade prior to that point. So I'm late into the game by about 50 years. My grandma never brought it up. My dad told me she was afraid it would conjure him by talking about it. My aunt and great-uncle were both mentioned as possible sources of information, but an internet search yielded squat. Based on what information I've given here, is there anyone here who knows more about the story? Or something like it, something both distinctly vampiric and not at the same time? Is it possible that it was demonic and the powers originated there? Only we have a name, so it feels more separated from the vast field of demonology. Is it a cryptid that happened to run into a witch, and the run-in and abilities just happened to develop at the same time? 2. I've been like this my whole life. I experience déjà vu very often. I see shadow people, see and hear things others don't. I sense things, I see dreams of places I've never been, and go through conversations with people who have already passed on. My whole family is like this from my mom's side, and I've been taught ever since I was young that it was simply a part of our heritage. Even with all of that, these things can still be explained. I have a strong intuition, and I've always followed it. I moved in with my family to a new house a few years ago. It's always been clear that there's a small house spirit, an elf, as it's considered in our culture, that's been with us for years. They're good-spirited and, when treated well, cause no harm. But that isn't what this is about. I noticed about a year ago that there was some sort of presence in the house, in my room. It tended to come out at night. I feel it's about the size of a large cat, moves on all fours. I haven't ever really seen it, only felt its presence. I call it the Watcher, as it doesn't carry an evil or good sort of energy with it. Kind of just seems like it wants to watch and learn about us, but it doesn't want to make itself known. It used to sit behind a pile of clothes in front of my closet, but now it's moved itself to the top shelf in the high corner of my room, almost as if it can't come closer. The new thing became apparent a few months ago. I felt it outside in our family's yard, and something is seriously wrong with it. It's nothing like the Watcher. It feels slimy, it feels big and bony, and it makes me so uncomfortable. Even when I can't see it, I can feel it behind a corner or behind my back as I walk to a house alone at night. So many times I've had to say out loud, "You can't come in," or saying "go away" to it before stepping inside. It tries to get in as I open the door to get in myself. A few nights ago, though, it feels like it got inside. I'd left my window open for a bit, as it was hot outside. I sleep extremely deeply, and barely ever wake up in the middle of the night. But that night I did, in cold sweat and a horrific feeling I was not safe. There was nothing in front of the closets, and the Watcher was small in its new place. I put my lamplight on and placed some sentimental items on my night desk next to my bed, after which I could go back to sleep again. The room felt so intimidating and dense, while at the same time the most calm and cool air was being poured in. Now it seems to watch me from the forest's edge, where our neighbors, my friends' parents' property, starts. It's not visible, ever. Never once have I seen it, but I already know how inhumane and uncontrolled it looks like. I've tried to do research on it, but I can't find anything that matches. Has anyone experienced anything similar to this? Can anyone please help me? I'm beginning to be afraid of going out at night, or going to bed to sleep. I'm so goddamn lost, I'd even appreciate any ideas on what this thing following me is. 3. I've never really talked about it with anyone other than my husband and my family, but I figured this would be a good place to get some answers or some insight as to what is and has been happening to me. I've never had any or many paranormal experiences prior to me and my family moving into a particular rental house sitting on a hill in an old neighborhood. Before that, we lived in a house for a little over 10 years that was newly built when we moved in. There, I never experienced anything paranormal or really even creepy or weird. I always assumed it was because it was new and nothing had ever happened there. When we moved into the rental house after, me and my sister immediately got an unsettling, dreadful, nasty feeling. At the time we brushed it off, to the house being old and kind of creepy. It was built in 1970, and it had those wood paneling walls and beige-brown carpet. I specifically remember telling my sister, "Yeah, that basement is gonna be a no." Throughout our time living there, which was short, only a year, I would get locked in the basement while doing laundry, and on a separate occasion the lights turned off. This extremely frightened me, and I ran up the stairs and ripped the door open to yell at my sisters, thinking they were fucking with me. They were just sitting in the bedroom at the end of the house with earbuds in and lost in their phone, saying they didn't do that, all nonchalantly. When they used to mess with me, they would smile and laugh a little while denying it. My mom, who has always been a Christian but got very religious after this, would see orbs flying around on the indoor cameras and hear doors shutting in the house. Our cats would act very strangely as well. After we moved, we found out someone had killed themselves in the basement. Then we moved into my windowed grandma's house to help take care of her. Nothing ever happened there. I chalked it up to my grandma and my mom being so religious they would bless the house often and recite prayers. Now I own my own house with my husband, and up until recently we haven't had anything happen. It started with a presence, and now it is trying to make itself known. My cat has started acting weird and scared in the living room. His hair will spike up, and he will growl at seemingly nothing. He didn't do this at our old place. Today, when my husband left to go run an errand, I started hearing bumping noises and footsteps. I opened the door thinking he had come home, but he hadn't. My cat was just sitting at the arm of the couch in the living room growling and looking terrified. I said out loud, "I know you're here. Please leave me alone." It didn't do anything after that. Before that, my car's battery died before I could take it to the shop, and then shortly after, while getting dinner, my husband's car's power steering went out, and it also wouldn't start. I'm really creeped out, and I don't know what to think. Is it a spirit following me? Or is it something that was, or is, trying to impersonate that poor person who took their life? 4. This is a story about the time I was seen, but it wasn't really me. Let me start by saying that my father's house is an old farmhouse, and has been there many years. I've seen and experienced things there several times, but this was by far the strangest. Several years ago, my now ex-husband and I were forced to move into my father's house due to poor maintenance in the apartment building we lived in. I had just gotten home from a trip to New York to visit family, and I was exhausted since I went alone with the baby. My husband told me to go upstairs with the baby, and he'd take care of washing the bottles. I thanked him and went upstairs to put our son to sleep. And shortly after I fell asleep as well. Suddenly, my husband barged into the room, startling me out of my sleep, and asked me if I'd just been outside. Still half asleep, I shush him, so he doesn't wake the baby, but he frantically repeats his question. "Were you just outside?" I look at him, and down at my outfit, and back up at him again. I was wearing a red t-shirt, his boxer shorts as bottoms, and my hair sat big and puffy on my head. I answered, "What do you mean? I've been here with the baby." His eyes get wide and he says, "I just saw you go outside." I'm still half asleep and ask him to repeat himself. Again he says, "I just saw you outside." He goes on to tell me he was washing the dishes, and in the reflection of the window he saw me come downstairs, turn my head completely to look at him, but I continued to walk straight and disappeared behind the wall into the living room. He said I was wearing a blue t-shirt, black leggings, and my hair was pulled up in a bun. What he said next still freaks me out to this day. He said my face was completely blurry, almost non-existent. He heard the lock click on the front door and assumed I had gone out to get something from the car. When he noticed I wasn't coming back inside, he went to the front door to see if I was okay, and I was gone. He also noticed the door was never unlocked. I froze, not knowing how to respond. After a moment, I began to say something and he shushed me. I asked him what was going on, and he shushed me even louder and said, "Do you hear that?" I said, "No. Hear what?" This man leaned into the hallway, looked down the dark steps and said, "Oh, shit," and turned around and booked it into the room, leaving me in the hallway. I ran in after him and shut the door, ran past him and jumped into the bed. While he locked it, he asked again, "You didn't hear that?" By now, I'm beyond freaked out. He says, "There was something running up the steps." He didn't scare easily, never did. He never saw me after that. Needless to say, it's been on my mind all these years, and it wouldn't be the only time someone saw me. 5. I stumbled across the video of that boxer guy on a plane freaking out and getting restrained because something about the guy next to him caused him to totally wig out. Watching this reminded me of something in my past from when I was much younger. For some insight, I live in the US and I'm 22 now. I was in 2nd grade when this happened, and since it has happened, I've told maybe 3 or 4 people about it. When I was in 2nd grade, I had behavioral issues. Due to this, I was in a special ed class for my 2nd grade year before switching schools halfway through the year. Back then, I was on meds, so I don't really remember too much. The main things I remember were the times I'd get into trouble, get embarrassed, or feel fear. These instances have stuck with me to this day, as in I still remember them quite well. In the special ed class, there were essentially 2 teachers, one actual teacher and then her helper. This memory is about that helper. Mr. G. Anyway, this is the only encounter with Mr. G that I remember, but this aside, I somehow remember him being a cool guy. Looked like your average suburban white dad. I remember liking him for the most part. I should also describe the classroom a bit, as it plays a role in this memory line. Basically, as soon as you opened the classroom door, there was a wall just to the right, maybe a foot or two away from the door, and to the left of the door was where the majority of the room was at. The wall on the right opened up into more room, maybe like 13 feet down the hallway. The wall on the right was actually a room in the room. It was an empty room used for timeout. It's hard to explain the layout, but the best way I can put it, imagine a larger room with a smaller room in the bottom right corner. The door to that timeout room was around the corner. So you weren't able to see the door to the timeout room from the class entrance. A chair would often be near the timeout room, as the kid in timeout would have to be monitored. There was no lock on the door, so the chair was like a security post. Now that the shape of the class and Mr. G have been established, the following is my experience. I was coming in early from recess. I can't remember why I did this. It wasn't allowed and certainly wasn't a thing I would normally do, but I did. I'm walking past the classroom, door is open, and I glance inside instinctively. I notice the timeout guard chair partially obscured by that corner. Only about 1/3 of the chair is visible. I see what looks like the back of a talon hand resting on a knee. Long, sharp fingers curled around black slacks. I don't register it at first and keep walking for a split second. When I immediately look back, I can clearly see plain old Mr. G is sitting in the chair. Like I said, I can see approximately 1/3 of the left half of the chair, so I see his left arm, clad in his light blue dress shirt, resting on his leg, clad in black slacks. I also remember he wore a stainless steel watch. I can see his hand on his knee, his normal human hand, I'll add. I doubt he noticed me, as I just kept walking after my double take, but this memory has stuck with me my whole life, and I have never experienced anything else like it. Hey everybody, Hellraiser here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 340. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, I would appreciate it if you poke the like button. Thank you kindly. If you'd like to get the videos a little bit earlier, then you can support me on Patreon for as little or as much as you like a month. The link to that is in the description, where you'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer Teespring store, where you can buy Hellfreezer-related merchandise. And you can make donations during streams and videos like this one, if you wish to do so on a one-off basis. While this is not required, the help is very much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, I don't think we've got any other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: how set in your ways are you? Do you find you're able to embrace new ideas, or do you need a bit of a kick in the bum, so to speak, to get moving and to open up your eyes, your heart, your mind to something new? Let's not get too serious about it. We'll keep it something important. We'll talk about food, as I often do. And lately I've been embracing options that don't use wheat, because my partner has a gluten allergy. So I'm more embracing what kind of things I can cook, recipes that I've made myself, that I can adapt and then sub out ingredients. And some of them work quite well, some of them might need a little bit of work. For example, when Jack was visiting a few weeks back, I made scones, but we got the wrong kind of flour. We didn't get self-raising flour. And they turned out very yummy, but they were a bit flat. So it's a learning process to get used to doing certain things. But I'm very, very positive and excited about the notion of finding new ways to make old classics, finding ways to make them palatable and tolerable to the two people who'll be living in my household. One of which is me. I'll let you guess the other one. Although gluten-free things can be very expensive. But even with that, it's been kind of fun for me, as an outsider, someone who doesn't have a gluten intolerance, It's not to trivialize it, but it's been an interesting journey, and it's one I obviously will be happy to continue. But it does play to the part of me that really likes to try new things, and this is a way of taking old things and making them new again. That's part of the reason why I'll eat vegetarian and vegan food, just because it's something new to try. I discovered I quite like vegan burgers, for example. But let me know what you think. Leave your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions in a comment below, and I look forward to reading them. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.